Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Voices of Recovery. I'm your host, Michele Eich, and every week I interview people who have overcome a life controlling issue with God's help. And today, my guest is Tiffany. Tiffany, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks, Michele, for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So, Tiffany, tell Voices of Recovery a little bit about yourself.
I am 39. I am a wife and I'm a mother to three very little ones. I'm a stay-at-home mom currently, and I also homeschool them. So,
Wow. Very nice. All right. Well, that's exciting. Well, thank you again for coming on the show. And you sent me your testimony, and it sounds like we have a mutual friend, and you reached out. I'm so glad that you did. And so I was just rereading your testimony today, and I just love what God has done in your life. And you have an interesting journey, and I have an interesting journey, which we kind of chatted a little bit about. Um, but let's just go ahead and dive in, and so our listeners can kind of get a feel for what God has done in your life, because it's truly amazing. So you mentioned that in the seventh grade, you experienced some sexual trauma, and this kind of led you down a path of some destructive behaviors, which I think is very common when somebody is traumatized in that way at a young age. Uh, you mentioned you had suicidal thoughts and you were cutting. This is something that we see a lot. I used to teach middle school. I had some kids who were doing this and acting out in this way. So tell us a little bit about that situation.
yeah, so the abuse happened, I believe, around the sixth or seventh grade. The memory is very foggy, not the
Mhm.
incident itself, but just the timing. Um, but all of that stuff just came because I just felt like I was dying inside. I was bleeding out and I didn't know what to do with it. I was scared to tell anyone. There
Right.
was so much shame, like it must have been my fault. So it was all just captured inside of me, and it was killing me, literally. So cutting my arms and things at the time felt like a release, a
Hmm.
band-aid. um, it was very temporary, but
Right.
and the suicidal notes, I remember leaving them just around the house. It was just like I was crying for help,
Right.
the best way I knew how at the time.
Interesting. So do you feel like cutting was maybe masking the pain that you were feeling on the inside to feel that physical pain instead of the pain that was within?
Yeah, I feel like the physical pain was so much better
Wow.
than um, the screaming and pain inside.
Okay. Interesting. And I know that this isn't necessarily an easy thing to talk about, but I do appreciate you sharing it because, again, it's your goal and my desire to help people who are going through
Hmm.
similar things. So I think talking about it is very helpful to others that have
Yes.
gone through something like you did. So then fast forward to when you're 18, you decide to kind of go in an interesting direction. You mentioned that at 18, you're still a virgin, but you decided to embark upon an interesting career. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I had these big dreams of becoming an actress, and I remember thinking, how am I going to get to New York and become an actress? And of course, the thought, become a stripper, came to mind. I'm not really sure why. I didn't know any strippers.
Hmm.
Um, but I did know that because of the abuse at a young age, I came to realize how powerful my body was.
Mm.
Um, and so I think that was part of the reason why I became a stripper, because my body became kind of my identity and I could get what I wanted with my body. I realized at a very young age.
Okay, interesting. You mentioned that you met an older man during this time, and you said that he was your knight in shining armor. He said all the right things that you needed to hear, and you let your guard down with him a bit. And what happened after that?
Yeah, so I was just looking for help, I think.
Mm,
Um, it was such a crazy situation. Looking back now, I don't even know how I walked into that door being a young virgin. But he kind of gave me that safe feeling that I had been desiring for my whole life.
right.
Um, so he said everything that I needed to hear to make me feel safe. And that started bringing walls down that I
Mhm.
had up for years. So I got really comfortable, especially since this man had seen me naked pretty much. I
Right.
thought being in that same way around him was no big deal. But, um, now I know it was. I had let
Mhm.
my guard down. Not that it was my fault at all. I said no, and that should have been enough.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, he took my virginity by rape, and things just start spiraling after that.
Okay. Um, Later, you got married and you had a child, and then things didn't work out. And you mentioned in your testimony that you were divorced at 19 with a child, and you really just had to grow up overnight.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that you said about that, Tiffany, which really got my attention was this. You said, I did the best I can with what I had. And it's a simple statement, but it's so powerful because at the time you didn't know God. And
Mhm.
I look back at different decisions that I made before I knew God, and I didn't come to faith in Christ till I was 30. So, you know, and looking back, I mean, I can kind of say, why did I do this? Why did I say this? But again, like you said, I did the best I could with what I had.
Yeah, yeah. I was a baby myself
Right.
with a baby. And I had just entered the world of sex, and all of a sudden I'm pregnant, and I wasn't I I was so immature. And so I think that in later years has brought a lot of forgiveness to myself too. Just
Right.
knowing that's the best I could do at that time.
Yes. And I think that's so true. We have to forgive ourselves. We didn't know what we didn't know, and we
Yeah,
have to give ourselves grace and keep
yeah.
moving forward. So I think that a lot of people ask the question when some kind of tragedy happens, like a rape or like
Mm,
a a sexual assault as a child. Um, where was God in this?
mhm.
And some people look around at all of the evil things that happen in the world and even say, you know what, how could there be a God if he would allow, fill in the
Mhm.
blank. So what would your response be to that? Where was God in this when these things happened to you?
Yeah, to be honest, that was one of the hardest part of my journey because it didn't make sense to me. I
Mhm.
didn't know. But now I see where I'm at, and the only way I got here was because of him.
Mm,
I see there was situations that I was in that he had to I couldn't walk out of them in my own. He had to
right.
literally physically carry me to this point
Right.
because of my past and because of my trauma. The world would tell me I really should have been in a mental institution,
Mm,
like so it is because of him completely that I am where I am today. And he gives us free will. And
yeah.
sometimes people make bad choices. And
Right.
he doesn't want that to happen. He grieves when that happens. And I believe he grieved every single time that I was hurt. Um, but thankfully, he's our savior, and he carried me through it all.
Absolutely. That's so powerful. I love that. And I recently interviewed a guest who said she actually saw Jesus taking that trauma upon
Mm,
himself. I mean,
mm,
by his stripes, we are healed, and it's not just a physical healing, but it's an emotional healing. And that takes some time. But he is just so So good. So I'm glad that you addressed that because I think it's a very, very common question that a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people have.
Yeah.
So you mentioned in your story that a few years ago, the sexual trauma that you had experienced as a young girl finally came to the surface. You
Mhm.
mentioned that you kept trying to push it down. It sounds like you really just didn't want to deal with it, or maybe even couldn't deal with it. But you got to the point where you couldn't stuff it down anymore. What was life looking like for you at that time, Tiffany?
Yeah, that was interesting enough. My rock bottom, um, which it didn't make sense because I just had these beautiful babies. um, but that was my rock bottom moment where everything that I had suppressed my whole life came up in a way that I felt it physically, and the pain I was in, there had to be relief. Like, I was having anxiety attacks. I had
Mm,
never had those before. I was crying constantly. I was, so disturbed by my PTSD. Um, I couldn't, everything could be turned into a fear. There was, I shut down. No one could come into my bubble.
mm,
Um, yeah, it was just, I was paralyzed by this, by the surfacing and by the fear. I still battle with, not not anywhere near that, but I still battle with jumping over fears to this day,
sure.
and I think that's normal.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes on our journey, we get to a certain place of healing, but there are things that what I call pick the scab, that kind of trigger us to take us back to something. Now, you
Oh
mentioned
yeah.
the PTSD, Tiffany. Can you kind of explain that for our viewers? I'm not sure everybody knows exactly what that is. And if you could talk about that a little bit, that would help.
Yeah, it's so crazy how common it is. As in my teenage years, it acted as, you know, um, the suicidal stuff and things like that. But in adult years, it came to the surface in a way of, I was constantly looking around. I was constantly on guard. I didn't trust anyone, including the Lord. I had to, sit with my face to the door and be on high alert to make sure, no one was coming in. So I was in constant
Mm,
fight or flight mode. A human touch could just send chills down my spine, and everything, inside of me needed to get away from that because touch was not safe anymore. So yeah, PTSD really, really had a grip on me for a really long
wow.
time.
Okay. So I think a lot of times we hear that regarding maybe people who were in the military, people who
Hmm.
were in combat zones and things like that, but it could be any type of trauma that
Yep.
happens to us, and then we kind of ignore it. We don't deal with it. If we don't know God, we can't give it to Him. And then it just kind of gets to the point where we can't function anymore, literally.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so at this point, you're kind of in a situation, you've got these little babies, you're a mom, you're a wife, you need to be engaged, you need to be okay. And you mentioned that you were desperately searching for something, and then this women camp kind of came on your radar. Now, I want you to tell us a little bit about the women camp, but at this point, do you know the Lord yet or not?
Yes. Right before my second husband passed away, I know we didn't talk about that much or talk about that, but
Mhm.
I came to know the Lord. I knew the Lord growing up in a different way, but my relationship with Jesus started around 25.
Okay.
So I start going to this church, and I heard about this experience called Women Camp, and there were thousands of women just sharing these stories, on the video at church, talking about how it changed their life and God did these amazing miracles, and they are new and healed because of women camp. And I was like, okay, I'm a girly girl. I don't like camping, but I'm going because
Yeah,
I can't take this anymore. I can't
right.
carry this anymore. So I walked into that experience thinking this was it. This was the end of my trauma.
Mm.
You know, I'm laying it all down here. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I have to laugh at your girly girl comment because my husband asked me to go camping and I'm like packing the Keurig, my
Yeah.
fan. He's like, yeah, no, that's not going to work. So camping to me is a Holiday Inn without Wi-Fi.
Right. Totally.
Okay, so you go through this amazing experience and there was an exercise where they had you put on a veil.
Hmm.
Okay, that sounded really interesting. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So this veil to me represented um, just the darkness that I was carrying for
Mm,
so long by myself. Um, and I was going full into this women camp, like I said, expecting my miracle. So whatever I did it with the Holy Spirit, and I did it with giving it my all. So a lot of people, everyone got this veil, and it was supposed to be whatever it represented to them, and then take it and throw it in the fire and, get rid of it.
okay.
That was great. But I knew that to me, the best I could do to that point, I had done everything I could do to that point. I know now that's not true. So I couldn't on my own take off that veil.
Mm,
Um, so I walked into the prayer tent with other women, and I just begged and pleaded with these women to go with me and burn this veil with me, because somehow I thought I needed the support. What I was doing on my own wasn't working.
mhm.
So, they walked down there with me, and we just prayed and pleaded with the Lord for this to be it, and burnt that sucker. And that stupid veil pops right back out. But we quickly pushed it back in and burned it. But that
Right.
that experience, and just being able to get those skeletons out of the closet and
Mm,
bring everything to light was the first step of, feeling freedom finally.
that's beautiful. I love that. So the veil was kind of representing darkness because I
Yeah.
was thinking like a wedding veil, which would represent like you're the bride of Christ, but this was something that in your mind was separating you from God, maybe. We
Yeah.
know
It
that the word
just,
says there's nothing that can separate us from the love of God on his end, but on our end, I think we feel shame, we feel dirty, we feel
mhm,
unforgiven, and all of that. And we know that that's a lie from the enemy, but it's a lie we believe. And when we believe that lie, it keeps us from God. But again, it's not on his end, it's on ours, if that makes
right. Yeah, it was those skeletons. Like, when I had all of that darkness down inside of me and didn't bring it to light,
sense. Hmm.
I couldn't be me, right? Like, I was
Right.
always like constantly, trying to pretend, like, especially in a church event, like, I didn't used to be a stripper. Look how, like, who
Yeah.
says that? So,
Right.
so, it was just like, I couldn't be me. That was
Mm,
still part of my past, whether or not that was a good decision. That was still a part of me. That still molded me, like,
right.
so it was like all the secrets, all the darkness, and,
Mm.
and getting rid of that and just bringing it to light.
That is an incredibly liberating feeling, and I know that firsthand. And I spent a good portion of my life keeping all those things in the closet hidden away. And it's like, you know what, God, I want to go out and change the world. And he's like, yeah, why don't we deal with this closet? It's like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whoa, that's an interesting idea. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm doing it. So here we go. So you mentioned earlier, Tiffany, that when you went to this women camp, that you were looking for a miracle. And it sounds like you were just kind of looking for something that would make you completely whole and completely free like that weekend.
That moment. Yeah.
And it sounds like you gained a lot of ground, you had a lot of healing, you connected with other people, but you still needed to work through some things.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I was definitely thinking an instant miracle was happening because I watched these testimonies, on the big
Right.
screen.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I quickly realized that it was going to be a journey, and that that taste of freedom, that bringing the light to darkness, and
Right.
not being judged and being loved, that taste of freedom, there was no turning back. It became like my drug that
Mm,
I was chasing after, because I needed more and more of it, like,
right.
because I hadn't felt that lightness since, before I can even remember, before my memories even start, I have not
Wow.
felt that lightness. So I had to have more of it. I couldn't go back to where I was.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people are there. And we need to understand that we are all on a journey.
Yes.
Each and every one of us, even if you're watching this and you're not even a believer yet, you're on a journey
Mm-hmm.
and God sees you,
Yep.
even though you may not even realize He's there. Just like at
Yep.
one point, you didn't realize He was there taking your pain and taking that trauma. But we're in a process, we're on a journey with God. And, there are a lot of scriptures that say, wait on the Lord, um, wait on God, things like that. Wait is not one of my favorite words in particular, but I kind of reframe that, and I see it as I wait with God.
Mm-hmm.
He is
Yes.
with me. He's with me on every single part of the journey. And there have been times where I think, wow, I have just reached the pinnacle of freedom and, the pinnacle of healing. And stop laughing. um, and then God just takes you into a deeper level of healing. I just had that happen last weekend,
Yeah.
and it's just what He does. So, if somebody's watching tonight and you just wish that you were further along than you are, I totally can get that, and I think Tiffany
Mm-hmm.
can too. And I love the saying that I heard somebody say one time: I haven't arrived, but I have left.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm probably not going to arrive with complete and total healing and freedom until the day Jesus takes me home. But I've gained a lot of ground in this life. And I'm
Yeah.
so grateful that He is with us every single step of the way.
Yeah. Yes.
That's so powerful. All right. Well, so you went to the women camp, you survived, and then you continued to walk out your healing. And you found out that at your church there was a group that was formed for people who were affected by childhood sexual trauma. Tell us
Mm-hmm.
a little bit about that, Tiffany, because I'm just saying kudos to your church
Yes.
for dealing with this incredibly difficult topic, but yet so many people are suffering in silence. So I want to hear more
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. So I had a lot of insomnia. There was no, I was constantly, in fight mode. So there was not a lot of sleeping going on. So our church was always promoting, saying, we have all these groups, find a group. So in the middle of the night, one night, I'm searching our church website, and I find this group, and I was just like, okay, God, like it was like the answer I was looking for, but
Right.
didn't necessarily know what that looked like.
Mm,
So it was right in front of me, and that group changed my life. I remember just walking in, and I saw others walking in, and I was just grieving, like, oh my gosh, they experienced this too. And my heart was just aching at all the people coming into the room. And, but in some way, it was so nice to know I wasn't alone anymore.
right.
You know, even people who are sexually traumatized, it's very hard to speak. And interesting enough, what you just said, I feel like the Lord has been calling me to give a voice to those who have been silenced.
Mm,
And, that's that's what it is, like, when I had all of these other people and this support group of people, um, there was no silence anymore. We kept each other accountable. We heard stories from therapists that were specific in that field, telling us this the reason you act the way you do is because your trauma. And I thought, it was all my fault, like,
Right.
and everyone was like shaking their heads and like mind blown, like, oh my gosh, this one
Mm,
incident in my life changed
wow. Right.
everything. So yeah, that group was so amazing and helped make me feel normal, and that it wasn't always going to look like, this. It wasn't always going to look like where I was at then.
Right. You probably met people who were on different stages of the healing journey,
Yeah.
and that had to be incredibly encouraging for you that you could get through this, that you could move forward with your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And
it
really,
was.
yeah, really, Tiffany, that's what this whole channel and this whole movement is about, because I want to show people who are not perfect, because none of us are, but they're on
Yeah,
a journey with God and they have overcome some pretty difficult life controlling issues with God's help. And I think that sometimes the enemy can make you feel so isolated, like you're the only one who's
yeah,
experienced this. There is a lot of shame with that. But when you actually connect with other people who get it, who
yeah,
understand what you've been through, it's just got to be so incredibly powerful.
yeah. And that's actually why I shout out about used to being a stripper, because a lot of people, like, are so guilt ridden of all the things that they have done in their life, and that just stops them from so much, like,
Right.
so not that people who were strippers are by any means bad people, because
No.
I'm still friends with them today, but it just is to say, like, anyone can do this, and you can bring all of that darkness to light and people still love you. So
Right.
that's why it's always super important to mention, that, and just
For sure.
showing that it's okay. Like, you don't need to be full of shame and guilt and all of those things that kind of come along with the trauma.
Absolutely. You mentioned that you were in a place where you could be your authentic self and people loved and accepted you
Yeah.
when you were. And when
Yeah.
you have to put on these masks, and I'm not talking about the mask that everybody's arguing about on Facebook. Okay, I'm talking about masks that cover up who you really are, and you're
Yeah.
pretending to be somebody you're not, and you don't want people to look in your closet, and you don't want, these things to come forward. But when you can just let your guard down and say, this is who I am, this is what I did, it is, I know from my own experience, it is so freeing and
Hmm.
it's so fantastic. And when you have the security of knowing that God loves you no matter what, that just takes you to another level of being able to be open, because it's like,
Yeah.
even if you don't accept me and even if you don't like or love me because of something I said or because of something I did or whatever, like, I'm secure in God's love for me. So
Right.
it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's so good. Um, so you joined this group and you were there for a couple months and you just went into deeper levels of healing and you're still on that journey. We all are.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So at some point, I know it's your heart's desire to share your story, and
Hmm.
it sounds like you're just now kind of doing that. Um,
Hmm.
and you want to help other people. So, Tiffany, what are some of the things that you're doing in order to help people? Because, you know, we've all read the news and there's just a lot going on in the world and there's a lot that's going to come out that's going to be shocking and traumatic to a lot of people. So I'm so grateful that people like you and your church are speaking out about this. So tell
Yep.
me and tell our listeners kind of what path you're on to that end.
Well, for a while, after attending the class, I felt just a call from the Lord to, um, host this group. And that just seemed crazy to me because, people had gone multiple times, and what are you talking about, Lord? Like, why would you want me to? So I met with, the host, and just said, I really feel like I'm supposed to bring this to my area, because there's multiple locations at my church, and host it. And I told him my story, and for some reason this guy agreed. Crazy. So I hosted it a few times, and that in itself just brought more and more layers of healing. Every time we would have the same professionals each time and hearing the same things, but it was like God had something new for me each time, which was really cool. And now I felt called the last couple of years to kind of stay home with my babies. And I think it was obviously to stay home with my kids and be with them in that experience. But I think also God just wanted me to meet me where I was at, instead of me working to try to figure everything out on my own so much.
Mm.
So he's just been calling me to use social media, which at first I was like, really, God, Facebook? Um, so for a couple months, he had, encouraged me to go live and share my story. And I just was fighting with him that for a while, but he just wanted to meet me where I was at. And he wanted me to um, I just felt like he was like, I have brought you here. I want you to give a voice to those who have been silenced, for those who
Wow.
can't speak. I know many people watch my video, and it's such a hard subject that
Mm.
not very often does anyone utter a word, and I know that it's not a personal thing.
Mhm.
It's so hard. So I
Right.
think just yelling it out more and more, and just letting the Lord guide that, that's going to shift, and that's going to change. I think, you know quite a few years ago, when the Me Too movement came out,
Mhm.
that that was, a shift that happened in the atmosphere, and bringing more and more of that darkness to light, and giving more and more people a voice. So I hope I can encourage others, um, just to do the same, but in a safe place, not just start shouting it out like I am. This was a long time getting here, this.
Oh, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I can think of vows I made never to tell a living soul anything about what happened to me. And maybe you had a similar situation, but as you continue to journey with God, He gives you the strength to do that. And,
Yeah.
if somebody's watching here now, terrified that God is going to make him or her speak out, it's not like that. You don't have to be afraid of it. He's just so good and He's so gentle and so kind. And one of the things that I just really love about God is that He'll ask us to do something, and then by His Holy Spirit, He'll give us the strength to do it. And
Amen.
that is just incredibly powerful. You said that when you started walking with God, life started to change for you, Tiffany, and that He was there every step. And when you said this next part, it really touched me. You said, He's there in the ugly.
Oh, yeah.
That is maybe one of the most profound statements that you've made.
Hmm.
So simple, so short, sweet, and to the point, but so incredibly true and life-giving.
Yeah. I mean, it's so true. I wouldn't have had this deeper relationship with the Lord if all that ugliness didn't happen. I am a control girl. So I thought I could do it all on my own. And, I had to lay all of it down, and that in itself was hard. And he met me in the pits, in
Yeah,
the worst of the worst times. And I had never been closer to him, still to this date, than in my healing journey. He is right there. They say, it says he's close to the brokenhearted, and that is 100% true. He will show up for you, and in those times, in a way that you couldn't even fathom.
that's so true. And looking back, over that healing journey for me, um, I just remember, as I look back on it, I just remember those were sweet times with Jesus. Like, I
Mhm.
don't remember the pain and the tears and just the sleepless nights and all of it. I mean, as I look back now, it's like, wow, when you go through the valley with him, I love the mountaintop, don't get me wrong, but the valley is just a place where you really get to know him, and
Yeah.
he can handle the ugly. I just love that. You're writing a book now about your experiences, and that can be that can be challenging, but I think it's very cathartic, to have that. And then on you have a page, and with your permission, I will share your page so that people
Yeah.
can follow you in your journey. I will do that after our interview is over. But you said that the Holy Spirit kind of helped you write the first chapter, which is awesome because writing
Yes.
writing isn't easy, and I'm an English teacher, and it's still not easy. But when he kind of gives you that inspiration, but you were kind of sharing about it, and then you ended chapter one with, "Let's go back to where it began."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Oh my goodness, Tiffany, you've hooked me," because that's, as a writer, as a strategy, you're supposed to hook your reader so that they continue reading. And it was like, "Oh, I want to learn more." So I think it's going to be incredibly powerful
Wow.
once you get that published. And so again, I will have your page. I'll put the link so that people can follow that. And then when the book is released, get a copy. And I just believe that there's a great healing movement that you're carrying, because people need to hear the hope and the
Yep.
joy that you have as you have walked through some very difficult things with God. And, I can see the joy and peace on your face, and it's just incredibly encouraging.
Yeah. Thank you. It seems so weird, to think about publishing this book,
Right?
just being in the middle of it. So you just kind of made it more real for me. So thanks for the encouragement. I needed it.
Yes. I'm having some of my own moments with my book. I've shared part of my journey in there, and just thinking to myself, wow, I swore I would never tell anybody this, and here it is, for the
Yeah.
world to see. But again, it just gives people who are stuck in a very dark place hope that with God it is possible to
Yeah.
walk out of those dark places into his marvelous light and into his glorious freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. Without him, I could only get so far.
Right,
I realized early on that especially being someone who really loves to be in control, that I can do it. I can do it on my
right,
own. And I chased it with everything I have. And I'm here to tell you that I could only get so far without him. And the rest was just, taking a step one day at a time and
right,
him blessing that step. I showed up that day, and some days that was all I could do was show up for the
right.
day, open
Mm,
my eyes and show up for that day. But other days it was just, you need to take this, you need to go to this class. Okay, God. And look at the breakthrough that I got out of that class. It was
right,
just being obedient to those steps, and and hanging on to his promises, like, if God brings you to it, he'll bring you through it, things like that. So in
right.
the middle of that, when the PTSD would not go, the shame and the guilt would go, and all the other things, but the PTSD was still gripping me so tightly.
Mm,
I could hang on to that. Like, he's not going to bring me this far and stop,
right,
so it was his promises that kept me going, because I got to a point where I knew, like, I did everything I could do. Maybe it's not possible,
right.
but it was just waiting on him to lift that from me.
Absolutely. That's so good. And speaking of his promises, one of my favorites is, "He who began a good work in you is faithful to complete it."
Yes.
And that is so beautiful. And we don't have to figure out how, but he helps us along the way. And
Yep.
speaking of that, I was reminded of another quote that you said when you talked about moving the mountain.
Mhm.
and how sometimes when God calls you to move a mountain, that He hands you a shovel.
Mhm. Yeah. I went to some prayer night, and one of our leaders said that, and he said, if God's asking you to move this, or you're asking God to move this mountain, be prepared to be handed a shovel. And I was like it just something clicked, like
Right,
that's what's happening right now. That's the journey. It's not
right,
with the woman camp what I thought was going to be the instant miracle. If that would have happened, I don't think the behaviors in my life would have changed. Like
wow.
I had to
Mhm.
go on this journey, although I went kicking and screaming at first, but I
Right,
had to walk on this journey with him to see, how far I've came. If it was
right,
just an instant miracle, you know, I I just would I would look back and be like, oh, maybe that was God. Maybe that was just a coincidence. Like it's
exactly.
just like, seeing every single step. And I picked up that shovel and we went together, and he was faithful every single step. Even though sometimes I took a wrong step,
Right,
and it led me down a little bit of a different path, but
sure.
he was still there. So
That's so good. And to be clear, we know that it's God doing this incredible work in us and through us, but we
mhm,
cooperate with Him. And
yes.
so that shovel might mean forgiving this person, or letting something go, or walking through the door at this ministry, which isn't easy,
Yeah.
right? And what you said is so true. I can think of a time where I just literally wanted God to wave a magic wand and just fix everything.
Yeah.
But like you said, if He had done that, I probably wouldn't be on this journey with Him. It'd have been like, oh well, that's cleaned up, and now I'll just go on and do whatever. And so I'm just, even though I at times I didn't understand what He was doing, He knows what He's doing.
Yeah.
And the more we cooperate with Him,
Yeah.
the easier it's going to be on us, even
Yeah.
though it can be challenging at times. So that's so beautiful. And as we kind of land this plane, Tiffany, I'm just thinking of a person who may be watching tonight who, like you, has tried everything
Mhm.
in her own power or in his own power to fix it.
Yeah.
Maybe you've gone to counselors, you've tried medication, you've tried different forms of therapy. Um, you know, God will let us do these things, and
Yeah.
sometimes we go to Him as a last resort, and sometimes we have to hit rock bottom, which isn't fun, but it's necessary in the process. And I know it can seem like a cliche, but when we hit rock bottom, we find out who the rock is at the bottom,
Amen.
and that's Jesus. And so if you're watching tonight and you're just really struggling with some traumatic situations, or maybe you have PTSD, or you've had a situation in your life that you just has really rocked your world, I just want to encourage you that God knows where you are. He knows what you need. He loves you incredibly. And I just would encourage you to cry out to Him, ask for
Mhm.
His help, and He will lead you on to the next step. It may be a ministry like Tiffany mentioned, it may be something else, but He is so there for you. He is for you, and He loves you so very, very much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amen.
Interesting enough, right before I got on this call, I was reading Psalms 32, and it talked about, basically, don't make me pull you along, like, and that's just so true. Just, it's not, he's going to be gentle,
Yes.
just take that one step with him, and he is so faithful. And it's never
Amen.
too late. Take all
Amen.
the excuses out.
Yeah.
It's never too late.
Absolutely. So again, I'll put your contact information up there. We look forward to the book being released, and maybe we can have you back on the show once that is.
That would be great.
But I do appreciate you coming onto the show, Tiffany, as our guest, and sharing some tough things, but God is just blessing you and leading you. And I'm just so excited for your journey, and I'm excited for the people that you're going to help with your story.
Yeah. Thanks, Michelle. You are doing an amazing thing, and thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for our guests who are watching tonight, this episode of Voices of Recovery. We're creating a safe place where people can go for support and encouragement on their journey with God. And if you're new to Voices of Recovery, please give our page a like or a follow so that you don't miss any of this content. And if you feel led, share this message out or host a watch party, because I believe there's somebody on your friends list who needs to hear what Tiffany had to share tonight. So God bless you, our listeners, and Tiffany, God bless you. And thank you again for being our guest on Voices of Recovery. And for those watching, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye.